Hey everybody, Eric Grenier here with Philippe J. Fournier for this week's episode of The Numbers. And Philippe, it was fireworks, it was explosions, there was parades, there was everything yesterday.
Really?
The House of Commons has returned, there was question period. I'm sure you were at the edge of your seat.
Well, since I'm standing up, no, I'm not. But for other reasons. Listen, man, I'm glad that many high-quality journalists and commentators are following the daily peripéties of Parliament. I'm not. I can't be bothered. I have too much on my plate with numbers, which are far more interesting to me. But you're asking, did you watch? Did you listen yesterday? And if so, what did you make of it?
Yes, of course. I did watch the first.
Did? Wow.
I did. I wanted to see how it was going to interact between the two of them. I am not guaranteeing that I will watch it more than that. I always think that there is a little element of, when you're covering politics, you also want to understand politics from the perspective of someone who does not cover politics. And people who do not cover politics do not subject themselves to question period.
Why would they?
So, you know, if your perception of the leaders is entirely based around how you've seen them in question period, it's going to be an inaccurate perception of how the public sees them, because that's not really how they take it in. But it was kind of what you'd expect. I mean, the first couple statements, very nice. Welcome back to the House. Happy that you're here. Let's try to be friends for a second. And then, of course, the gloves come off. I mean, it's what you'd expected. Poilievre is effective in that space. He's been there for a long time. Carney, still not very effective in that space, but his approach is so different. You wonder if that's just how he's going to be. He's not trying to be smooth in the same way. In the end, does it really matter? I like watching actually sometimes the reaction of the rest of the caucus, because if anything, it gives you a little bit of a sense of what the mood is. Yeah. And, you know, the mood seemed pretty, let's say, upbeat, I guess, or enthusiastic behind their leaders on both sides of the aisle. So I guess that's setting us up for a little bit of a pugilistic few months in the House of Commons. But we got to talk about how long this actual House of Commons can last. Now, there's been lots of chatter this past week about how could this government last? How could it pass a budget when it might have a deficit of $100 billion? Who's going to be the dance partners? So I think that might be where we'll start today.
Okay.
We're going to look at some of the polling numbers we've seen over the past week and kind of get an indication of who has the incentive and who has the disincentive to support Carney and Liberals in this minority government. What's your gut check right now? Like, if you have a calendar preparing for the next federal election, what month are you circling?
Okay, just before we get to that, incentive to support Carney and incentive to make this parliament last, I think, are two different things, right? No party right now. Well, I don't think no party has much incentive to support Carney, but they want to make a show of, okay, we won't take the government down, because an election right now would be disadvantageous for many of them involved. And I don't think the Canadian public would really like to have elections in back-to-back years. I know it's happened before, but it's not really good for anybody. Okay, so the calendar. We're going to get to that at some point. Our Christmas episode of Over-Unders is coming soon. 3 months, man. But Over-Under on the next federal election. I mean, if I say spring of 27, so 2 years for this minority government, what would you say? Would you say before or would you say after? What would be your gut check? Because I could see the case right away.
Yeah.
There you go. That's the correct answer.
Yeah, it probably was. But, minority governments usually last for 18 to 24 months. So that would be what we would expect. The fact that the last one almost did the full 4 years was an anomaly, was an exception. It's not what we should expect to happen. But I don't know. I think we'll find out soon, because the mood, the sense of this government, I think, will be revealed in how the parties act when it comes to that budget. After the Harper minorities, 2006, 2008, There was always this feeling about like, whoa, everything could just fall apart very quickly, and we could be back into an election campaign. But you eventually got the sense from each of the parties that the Liberals were trying to avoid an election, the NDP was willing to do that, the Bloc was willing to do that. So far, everybody's talking a big game. Yeah. When the chips are pushed onto the middle of the table, some of them are going to fold. They're not going to do it just yet, but they will do it in October. At least that is my sense. I really don't think we're in a Joe Clark 1979, 1980 scenario where we go to an election within a year of the previous one.
Yeah.
But one of the things we've said often on this podcast before is that you can't account for people making bad decisions in politics, kind of working themselves into a corner, and then they have to walk over the paint. I think that is a possibility as well. I just don't think it's very likely. That brings us to that topic. Who should want to go to an election this fall, and who shouldn't? And we got some new numbers this week that can help clarify that.
Yeah, let's go with by elimination right now. Okay, we'll get to the numbers, but the NDP has no interest in an election. It's just that the NDP, I don't think it has interest for many of the things Carney is proposing. So they're in a bind right now, but they're in no position to go into an election. The latest numbers, I mean, we had the Léger and Ipsos, a research co, and the usual nanos in the past week. Léger was actually released a day after our last recording. The NDP is at 6 from Léger, 7 from Ipsos, 8 from Research Co. And they're doing a little better in nanos, but that's been the case for quite a while at 13. If you weigh the average, it's around 8%. The NDP doesn't want to go into an election and grow their debt with 8% of support and no leader. So I think that's pretty clear. Am I wrong about this, Eric?
I mean, you could take the approach that maybe they have nothing to lose. Because if all they need to do is, if all they need to do is find 5 seats, maybe they can do that. Now, maybe they could lose 5 seats. I'm sure their financial situation is probably not great after the last campaign. So they have a lot of incentives to try to make sure this government doesn't fall. But could they swallow themselves whole again? The fact that the Singh NDP did so often was one of the contributing factors to their defeat and their catastrophic result in the last election. So could they... I would think that of all the parties, they were probably the one that hopes the most that they don't have to support the government. They're hoping someone else does so that they don't have to take that hit.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. The Bloc Québécois now. Bloc Québécois, mid-20s in Léger, 30s, according to the Youngest Street Institute, and last week, and Ipsos this week at 32. I think Research Co has them at 28, so status quo. On average, I think they're nearly where they were last time around. The narrative may have changed a bit elsewhere in the country, but it hasn't changed that much in Quebec. I mean, Trump and dealing with the Americans is still high, near the top of mind of Quebec voters. So, what do you think? Is Blanchet gonna end this parliament first? Is he gonna be the one to pull the trigger?
I think there's 2 factors that are kind of counterweights to each other. One is the fact that the Bloc doesn't really have anything to lose for an election. They got 22 seats in the last campaign. That wasn't a great result. They could probably do a bit better. It would be hard for them to do a lot worse, I think, in the current context. The party's usually in decent organizational shape. It doesn't need to spend as much money as the other parties, so why not go to an election if it's on a question of principle? The other thing is that the Bloc has always tried to present itself as the responsible kind of party in the House, that it's not as partisan as the others, that tries to work with the other parties when it can to get things for Quebec. So to bring the government down after 6 months would seem to be irresponsible, right? So you do wonder if the Bloc would try to find something to say, look, we've gotten something for Quebec, and that's why we're here. There's not, Quebecers didn't send the Bloc to Parliament to bring down a government that's popular in Quebec.
That's right. That's the thing, right?
So I could see them find something in the budget that would be enough for them to let it pass. And we also have to remember that one of the options that each of these parties have is to make sure not enough of them show up to defeat the government, which is another way to do it in a roundabout way. I think Michael Ignatieff did that a couple times. It kind of looks pretty weak, but it is an option.
Yeah. Well, yeah, where the leader would vote against and the rest of the caucus would abstain, something like that. I mean, you could do that. Does it look weak? There's a context to everything. When Michael Ignatieff did it, it was another story. But in the Léger poll, satisfaction number for the Carney government was a plus 13 from coast to coast, down from plus 20 earlier this summer. In Quebec, it was still plus 20, 53% satisfied, 33% dissatisfied. So, yeah, no matter what you think, right now the numbers are good for Carney in Quebec, and so the Bloc has an incentive to try to make this parliament work, at least for a little while, and at least until the Parti Québécois wins the next Quebec election, but we'll get to that later in time. So, it is a factor. It is a factor, right?
But does that mean, though, that the Bloc's hands get tied as soon as we enter 2026?
Well, the context could change. If we sign a new COSMA, I think everything resets, right? So it's hard to make predictions about this. But again, the Parti Québécois and the Bloc Québécois, they're not in best terms right now, especially the leaders. I mean, it's been very public, but they're going to have to work together. We are entering an election year in Quebec where one of the main issues will be the Parti Québécois wanting to hold a referendum, a hasty referendum. So the Bloc will have its hands full with this. So taking the government down, the popular government down, popular for now, would be unwise, I think. And the numbers suggest the Bloc would not gain much from doing this. So,
yeah, and of course, once the campaign starts, you never know if you end up worse off at the end of it.
Yep.
All right, the Conservatives.
Yeah.
The last set of polls have been pretty consistent. They have 38 in Léger, 39 in Ipsos, 38 in Research, and now even Nanos is starting to get closer to that kind of group.
Yeah.
They had 34.5 today, this morning. I mean, the Conservatives are getting a decent amount of their policy platform implemented, which is one of the things Poilievre is complained about, that Carney is stealing some of his platform ideas. But, I mean, they're the official opposition. Could they back the government on a budget that, especially if one has a huge deficit, a record deficit, bigger than the ones that Trudeau had outside of the COVID years?
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think? What about the Conservatives?
Well, my gut instinct, again, in looking at the numbers, the Conservatives are polling okay. They're doing okay in the polls, right? They haven't lost that much support since the election. There was only Nanos that saw them take a serious dip, and then it's regressing to the mean. But you're the official opposition. You have to oppose. But what gives me pause, Eric, and you saw Mr. Carney meeting with Danielle Smith in Alberta last week. And Danielle Smith had pretty nice words to say about Mark Carney and his plans. Like the best meeting she's had with a PM. Of course, she only met Trudeau and Carney, so maybe the bar was low. But that's still quite interesting, and so maybe the big national projects that the Liberals put on the shelves, not on the shelves, but on not on a hold. What I'm looking for?
In the window?
In the works, right? And those that are on the shelf but on the next phase seem to be many premiers seem to be very supportive of that. So, yeah, that's kind of the debate to have among Conservatives, what to do with this. Try to oppose, but make it work for a little while until maybe the wind turns on the Carney government, because it hasn't so far. That's a tough spot, but I think Monsieur Poilievre would hope that the NDP or the Bloc decides to support the government. That would be their best, because they could just oppose and not be scared that an election is coming.
Yeah, I think that Poilievre needs to have a strong stance ahead of that January leadership review.
That's the thing.
Conservative Party members tend not to be all that friendly to the Liberal Party, so I imagine that they would not look kindly on Poilievre supporting the government. But, you look at the latest polls, we had a 42 for Nanos, 43 for Research, 43 for Ipsos, 47 for Léger for the Liberals.
Yeah.
Not really the kind of numbers that you should bring a government down on, right? You can imagine that the context is probably going to be a lot better for the Conservatives next year or the year after that. And that might be the better time to bring them down. Then the hope that over the course of a campaign, they can bridge the gap, which is what they would be trying to do right now. So yeah, I agree with you. Not as much as the NDP, but they might want to make sure they might want to see that one of the other parties supports the government. Now we're also just talking though in the current context.
Yeah.
It is going to be a budget that is going to. I mean, Carney has called it himself an austerity budget. I'm not sure if he said it in English, but he said it in French.
En français, yeah.
Yeah, and it's possible that this budget goes down like a lead balloon, and the parties suddenly find themselves in a much better position. That the NDP is up 5-10 points, the Conservatives are leading in the polls nationwide, the Bloc is doing a teeny bit better in Quebec, and suddenly, why not pull the plug on the Carney government if the budget is not popular?
You are giving shivers down the spine of every journalist in Ottawa. Like, no, please, no.
I'm not
soon.
ready for a campaign. I don't want one.
Well, we're doing okay in a campaign. I mean, we're the only ones who do okay in a campaign. Come on. But yeah,
I know, but I need at least a year.
At least a year. I want to pull some numbers. We talked about the Angus Reid Institute poll last week. I don't think we got into the numbers because they had just been published. So do you have an overall favorable or unfavorable view of Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada? Now, this is the Angus Reid Institute, and right now, among current polls, this is the best poll for Conservatives. The Conservatives were leading in the voting intention in this poll. So, 58% unfavorable, 36% favorable. That's a minus 22. And when you look at the regionals, in Alberta, 52 favorable, 44 unfavorable. And that's a huge sample, by the way. It was 3,600 across the country. So a big sample. So you have the Conservative leader being a +8 in Alberta. That doesn't seem very good. That doesn't seem very high. And so, again, the Conservative brand appears to be doing better than M. Poilievre himself. Considering that I think this fall, the theater of the fall, the main play of this fall, will be Pierre Poilievre, auditioning for his role of Conservative Party leader with the Calgary Convention in January in mind. Given this, I think they'll do everything to avoid an election. I know that the numbers differ from firm to firm, but the Angus Reid Institute has these numbers with huge sample size. Monsieur Poilievre is up in Saskatchewan by 16 points. He's up, as I said, in Alberta by 8 points. And everywhere else, he's down double digits. So they have a lot of comms to do before Monsieur Poilievre can go back facing Carney and the electorate in an election. Now, Chantal Hébert mentioned many times lately, an accidental election can happen. 1979 was, 1980, but the end of Joe Clark was kind of accidental. It was not supposed to happen. That's the only way I could see this parliament not lasting at least one calendar year. But, well, I guess we'll see. Accidents can happen.
The thing with the 79 example is that I was reading I can't recall which book it was, but it was talking about the fall of the government in 1979. And so if people don't understand the context, in early 1979, Pierre Trudeau's Liberals had delayed an election because they were so unpopular. They go into the campaign. Joe Clark wins a minority government, a pretty big one, just like Mark Carney just did. And they governed like they had a majority. They went down on a budget vote, the social credit vote, which the PCs were kind of counting on, didn't end up materializing. But there is a little bit of a misconception about it. According to some people within that government, they were aware that this budget was going to fall, and they thought that they would win the election. Because at the time, Trudeau had resigned as leader of the Liberals. He hadn't officially stepped down yet. So the PCs thought that they weren't even going to be up against Trudeau, and that the party was going to be in disarray. They thought that they could take a campaign and win it. They were kind of ignoring what the polls were suggesting. I think they were banking it on like an old poll that had them pretty far ahead. So if you believe that you can win in a campaign, maybe falling on the budget's not a bad thing, which brings me to the Liberals. They only need 3 seats for that. Maybe Mark Carney believes he can get them.
But do you believe that? Because, only 3 seats, but that includes 44 seats in Quebec and 20 in BC, which both are record highs in this century and then some. When was the last time the Liberals won 20 seats in BC? I think I looked it up.
Ever?
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't think they ever did. And 44 seats for the Liberals in Quebec. That was the best since the 1980 Pierre Trudeau victory. So if you're just saying, well, obviously we'll keep all our seats and all we have to do is win 3 more, that would be such a bubble think. Because that's not how anything works in the numbers. And sabotaging your own government, if you're not a conservatives, usually you pay the price in the polling booth. Like we've talked about this before. I think I've said that when governments decide to go early because they see an opportunity, sometimes it backfires because the public doesn't like it, except if you're a conservative. For the Carney Liberals, I don't think it would work at all. Like we need 3 more seats, so let's plunge the country into an election. That would be suicidal. But what do I know? Maybe they have internal numbers. It's just that are you thinking that it's a possibility?
No. I don't actually think that. I'm just saying. I'm just spitballing here.
Okay, all right. We're just talking.
And like the thing to remember with the 79 example is that budget included an 18-cent hike in gas prices. Now this is in 1979. And they're adding 18 cents to a liter to the gas, or maybe it was per gallon. I'm not sure which at the time. But anyway, that was part of the budget. But it or not, unpopular measure in the budget. There might be some unpopular measures in the upcoming budget, so that could be a factor here. But when you listen to us, I guess the conclusion is that we shouldn't expect an election this fall.
That would be insane, Eric. Like, the thing is, again, the example of 79 was a bit insane. We've never seen that before. Well, we've never seen that in modern times. What are the, shortest time between consecutive federal elections? Shorter than Joe Clark's? You would have to go back to the 19th century, and I'm not even sure. Because the election was in May 79, and then the government fell, I think it was in late November. So that's...
The only other time I can think of elections
months.
happening in consecutive years was 1925 and 1926 and 1962 and 1963 and also 57 and 58. So it's happened a couple times.
But it's been a while.
But it's been a while, and they were all pretty unusual circumstances. So I don't know if we're quite there, but maybe we will be. So anyway, that'll be something that we're going to have to keep watching over the next little while. I know that the punditry loves the speculation of whether the government's going to fall and how can the parties do it and how could they accept this, how could they... Parties are willing to swallow themselves whole pretty often, and that is my expectations here. I think that it will be easy enough for the Liberals to give at least something for one of the other parties, either the Bloc or the NDP, to say, we don't like most of it, but we want this, it's important. And so we find ourselves at least without an election in the fall, and then we just have to do this all over again in the spring.
Let's do it.
All right, do you want to move to some provincial stuff?
Absolutely. I don't think there's much to say. I mean, there again, many polls, we talked about them already. Maybe we just mentioned the Nanos tracker. Yes, the Conservatives are only 7 points behind. They used to be 12 points behind. Best preferred Prime Minister, Carney 51, Poilievre 28. No significant change in recent weeks.
And I just note that of the polls that came out, you do see some consistency in terms of approval with the government.
Yep.
Léger has government satisfaction at 51, Carney's approval at 53. Ipsos has Carney and government approval. They kind of included in their question at 58. Research has an approval rating for Carney at 56.
Yeah.
All those numbers kind of in the same way. You see majority support for the government, but it's less than it was earlier in the year. That is the kind of the consistency we're seeing in those numbers.
Yeah.
So there is some kind of chipping away at Carney's popularity, but he's still overall pretty popular prime minister, at least at this stage.
For now.
All right, let's move to an actual election that has been called in Newfoundland and Labrador. The province will be going to the polls on October 14th, which was the scheduled date. It's going to be a 28-day campaign, which is the shortest allowed in the province. We still got nothing much to work with.
Nothing much. We have nothing to work with. We have the approval rating from Angus Reid Institute, with fewer than 200 respondents for Newfoundland, we have nothing to work with. So
that is the only thing. So I'll only, just because it's something. We had an approval rating of 51% for John Hogan, the Premier, and an approval rating of 31% for Tony Wakeham, the PC leader. That would suggest the Liberals probably have a lead. That's all we know right now going into this election. I'm hoping we'll see some polls over the course of it. Yeah. Although part of me is also really curious what it would be like if there wasn't an actual single poll out of this province, and we just got a big surprise, big reveal, like a gender reveal party, an election reveal party on October 14th on the night. I don't know. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking that I did speak to some pollsters about this, and they said unless, I'm paraphrasing, of course, unless somebody gives us a big bucket of money to poll Newfoundland, we're not gonna. So they are worried about the reputation. It's a tough place to poll, small population. So no offense, Newfoundland. It's just that if you want to have some polling, somebody's going to have to pay for it. Many pollsters will not just absorb the cost. So you have to think we'll have one or two, but who is it going to come from? Mm-hmm. Usually Main Street Research goes everywhere, so maybe we'll have one of those. Usually we have the late forum, but the late forum has not been that great in recent elections, if you take a look at it. So if we have to wait until midnight Eastern, it would be, 11 Eastern time the day before the election to have a single poll, and then we're not going to cover much of it. But we'll follow, and it'll be interesting. Liberals have been in power for a decade, so we'll see if they can carry on.
Yeah, a little test of whether the brand is continuing to be kind of rehabilitated with Carney, and if any of the patterns we saw in the federal election where the Conservatives did pretty well in Newfoundland, whether we'll see that with the PC. So we'll talk more about this election as much as we can, and right now we don't have much to say. Ontario.
My God, what happened last weekend?
It wasn't a surprise, was it?
It wasn't a surprise, but the way it unfolded was so strange too. So to those who don't know, unelected Ontario Liberal Party leader Bonnie Crombie receives 57% of support in a confidence vote from the members. Seems like she was going to stay, talk to caucus, and then an hour or two later, we have the news that she resigns. And that's one more resignation on your column, my friend.
It is.
So you're creeping up. I hear those footsteps in behind. So for those who don't know what we're talking about, the draft of resignations for 2025, I was leading 5-1. Now it's 5-2 because Eric picked Bonnie Crombie very smartly. Eric, why don't you? What do you think of what's going on here?
Well, 57% is technically enough to stay on, but realistically not enough to stay on. Jason Kenney, when he got, I think it was 54%, he resigned he was premier. He gave up the premier's office when he got that 54%. And generally speaking, in the past, we've seen when leaders get south of 70%, they often step down. Because when they are in that, generally speaking, when any of them are below 80, there's some red lights starting to flash. And we've seen lots of cases where leaders were in the 74, 75 range. And while they don't resign that day, they end up going away not too long after that. So for Bonnie Crombie, if she thought she could stick around with 57%, no, you can't stick around with 57%. And it wasn't even that much higher than what she got in the leadership race. Yeah. She got, I think, 54 again. So she only picked up a couple of points. So she had to go, I think, after that result. And it is kind of remarkable that it doesn't seem like she or her staff around her were expecting that low a result. Some of the people were talking about the 65 to 75 range, something like that, maybe closer to 75. Wasn't even close to that. No. So, it was kind of inevitable, right? The party did a good result in the popular vote in the last election.
Yep.
Finished second, pretty comfortably second. But only picked up a few seats. Yes, they got official party status, but one of those seats was in Crombie's. It wasn't going to be easy for her to stay on, I don't think, even if she managed to get 80% in this vote. So I think it was almost a natural kind of thing that had to happen after the election. It probably might have been easier if it had just happened on election night.
Oh,
and
yeah.
the party would
absolutely.
already be in maybe in the midst of getting a race started. And instead, I saw a thing today that said maybe it would kick off in March. We'll see. But I mean, I think the party needs a leader in place. I don't think they should do that experiment like we've seen in Quebec and some other places where you choose a leader like just a couple months before the election is actually going to be called.
Yeah, the thing is, you need someone in the legislature. Like, let's be fair here. Yeah, we have had unelected leaders then go on to be elected. But we talked about this the day after the Ontario election, Eric. When she lost her own seat and lost the election, but it was over for her. It was over for her. Like, for a minute, I think you and I thought it was over for Poiliev. I thought it was over for Poiliev, losing the election that he was supposed to win and losing his seat. Now, he's trying to recover, and he could very well. But Crombie was never going to recover. I looked it up. And in the next general election, unless Doug Ford goes really early, she would be 70 years old. Like, she's not going to stay unelected for 4 years. Leading the caucus Liberals from the outside the legislature. So I'm not surprised. I'm just surprised that she didn't see the writing on the wall. I mean, like, this is humiliating. Somebody told me in politics, what matters the most is how you go out. People remember how you went out, right? And had she resigned gracefully on election night, says I didn't get it done, I think people would see her in a higher esteem. But now she looks a bit foolish right now. She should have seen this coming. There's something about those leadership votes. Like, a good leader should know ahead of time if they have the support of the membership. Like, they shouldn't do internal polling. If they saw, you said 65 to 75 and it was 57, so not even close. This is a bad result for the OLP, bad result for Crombie. And you said it could start in March. They have time, so why not use it, right? Why not use it? And also, we'll talk about the Ontario NDP very soon. They also could maybe be in the leadership race. So wouldn't that be interesting to have both parties running leadership races at the same time?
Yeah, I imagine she's in better shape. We did see some polls over the last week from Palace and from the Angus Reid Institute. Kind of similar polls, had the PCs at 45, had the Liberals at 25 or 26%. So that is worse than where they were in the election.
Yep.
So that's just another knock against Crombie at this stage. There's a couple names that have been bandied about as potential candidates. You got Nate Erskine-Smith, who finished second last time. Karina Gould as well, apparently maybe kicking the tires. Both of those would need a by-election for us, so that's very exciting. Some within the caucus, you got Stephanie Bowman, you got Ted Hsu, you have Adil Shamji, people who either were going to run or did run in the last election. You had Jeff Lehman, who's been mentioned. He was the Barrie mayor who almost won in 2022. He didn't run last time. So there are some interesting candidates, and I think that the field might be okay this time because I think it's reasonable. After the last election, it was more like whoever wins this party has to rebuild it. After this election, it's more like you probably still got to do a lot of rebuild, but you might actually have a chance to become premier. So I think that they might attract some good candidates. And whether it's in the House or outside of the Queen's Park, at least now they have 14 MPPs. Some of them are in safe enough seats, so some of them could step aside to give the leader a seat if the leader does not have one. So they have a little bit more options. It's a leadership race that could be a bit better than the last one in terms of what's on offer for the potential winner.
Interesting. Well, as long as we don't see Doug Ford is still leading by double digits, it's gonna take something to happen. It's gonna take something tremendous to happen for that to flip because the numbers haven't flipped in 7 years. So.
We'll look at some other provinces right now. We got a poll from the Angus Reid Institute, which seems to be a new thing they're kind of doing, which is a voting intentions poll for every province outside of Atlantic Canada.
Sorry.
They said the samples are too small. I wonder. Exactly.
Well, okay, so, but the leader approval rate for instance for Newfoundland, it was under 200
Yeah,
cases.
okay.
So if you have a voting intentions with a plus or minus 9, it's not useful. So I understand
all
why
right.
they're doing it. Sorry.
All right, we'll give them that benefit of the doubt. All right, so we got polls from BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Quebec. I also mentioned the one in Ontario.
Yeah.
I don't know. How do you want to approach this?
Well,
Why don't you pick out some
Okay.
that you thought were interesting?
No change in Alberta. No surprises in Alberta. 51 UCP, 40 NDP. That's very close to the averages we have. Reinforcing my point last week that there's a pretty good chance that Danielle Smith goes early, and I would circle next spring. She was elected in May 23, so May 26 would look good to secure another majority. No change in Saskatchewan. 54% for the Sask Party, 41% for the NDP. Well, the NDP did have 40% in the election, right?
It's pretty much the result of the last election.
No big surprises. The ones and BC also no big surprise. 44 Conservatives, 42 NDP. That's well within range of the election result that was last fall. The NDP did win the popular vote, but that's within range. The ones that I wanted to point out to you and discuss and ask you, Eric, is Manitoba. So Manitoba has 48 NDP, Monsieur Canu, 41 for the PCs, and 10 for the Liberals. That's a 7-point lead for the NDP, which would probably lead to another victory. But that's a much closer race than what we had seen from, let's say, Probe Research, the local pollster, in recent months. What do you say about that?
Yeah, that one I do kind of wonder about. Smaller sample, we got 300 respondents for this one. Doesn't back up what we've seen from Probe, but it also, probably more significantly, doesn't back up what we just saw happen in the Spruce Woods by-election, where the NDP almost won it. So I would suggest that this might be on the closer range of where the margin of error would put things, where it's probably a bigger gap, considering that the same poll had 61% approval for Wab Canoe, but only 48% voting intentions. I don't know. Are the Liberals really at 10%? Maybe not. I don't know. So, but look at the numbers for Obi Khan, the leader of the PCs.
That's bad. Oh, yeah.
24% approval, 46% disapproval for the opposition leader. That would be, to me, a pretty dangerous number to see. You wonder if a bit of that 41 PC is a bit of a institutional conservative vote, that in a campaign, if people aren't happy with that leader, then that number could come down.
Yeah. Quebec, not very different from what we had seen. The Industry Institute, I mean, they polled Quebec. If you look at numbers of the past years, you have to take it with a grain of salt, but they still had numbers that pretty much mirror what we saw from Palace last week. 38 PQ. They have the Liberals a bit lower at 21. 16 Conservatives. Palace had 15. That's reasonable. The CAQ at 12. Now, we expect, Eric, a Quebec poll from Léger, if not this week, very soon. And so that's two polls showing in the low double digits CAQ support. From Palace, it was 11. From the English Institute, it's 12. Are we that far away from maybe soon a 8 or a 9% for the CAQ? At this point, it's possible.
Yeah.
I think the clock is ticking. There's a good chance that over the Christmas holiday, perhaps Monsieur Legault rethinks his future. Ooh. But he went on the tour of media. He went on Midi Info, the noon hour show in Radio Canada. He went on Patrick Lagacé, the morning show of Cogeco in Montreal. Like, clearly stated, I'm staying till the end. I will be on the ballot in 26. Now he has to say that, but he said it quite forcefully. So maybe he really believes it, but there's still a year, so we'll see.
The one number that I think really stood out for me in this one is in BC. The BC Conservatives do seem to be having a bit of some caucus infighting. If you look at some of the... I saw some tweets from Jazz Johal, for example, suggesting that... well, I won't repeat it because I can't back it all up, but you should look at his Twitter feed. There's some suggestions that there's been some caucus meetings involving John Rustad, the leader of the BC Conservatives, that have not gone very well. I'll just put it that way. And he's in the midst of this leadership review, which is like a month-long thing where people can vote in different parts of the province at different times. It's very convoluted. Yes, the Conservatives are up 2 points over the NDP in this poll, but his approval rating was 28%, which suggests that the BC Conservative brand is significantly more popular than John Rustad's brand, and his disapproval was 56.
Oh, that's high.
It's hard to see those kinds of numbers and think that John Rustad's in a good position to become premier, even if the Conservatives are competitive. I'm starting to wonder why we didn't choose John Rustad in our leadership resignation draft. He might have been a better pick than Scott Moe, which is who I chose. And I'm not exactly sure why. But anyway, that is something to watch there. And I saw that the BC Conservative Twitter account, which is not the first time that they've been poll boosters, boosted the fact that, boasted about that they were up 2 points over the NDP, didn't really boast about the fact that their leader has majority disapproval. Something to watch in British Columbia. I'm not sure if John Rustad's going to be on the ballot in the next election in BC.
By the way, we mentioned Monsieur Rustad when we drafted the resignation for 2025. He wasn't our special mention, but he had just almost won the election 2 months prior, right? So... But if you're arguing that was he a better pick than Scott Moe, I go back and look at my face when you pick Scott Moe. Like, okay, that's out of left field. Do you know something we don't, Eric? But yeah,
maybe he's going to take a job in the private sector. Come on, there's only 3 months left. Come on, I need another resignation to catch me up here. I think I'm going to lose this badly. Let's close with your numbers on Quebec sovereignty. So lots of discussion over the last little while about how the PQ is on track to win the next election.
Yeah.
And if they win the next election, their promise is to hold a referendum by 2030, I think it is. So that's of some import for voters inside and outside of Quebec. What did the poll find when it came to sovereignty?
Okay, so when I commission a poll in Quebec, I always ask for the sovereignty numbers along with voting intentions. That's like a baseline, and then you ask other questions about issues. But you always have to have it. Now, the numbers, the top line numbers, 55 would vote against sovereignty, 35 would vote for. The yes side is up 3 points, but it's a regression to the mean when you look at the long-term trend. But thing is, sometimes you have to go a bit more granular. You have to dig a little deeper. And so the question was asked, and I'm paraphrasing here because I can't translate live, but Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, PQ leader, promised that if he's elected next year, he would hold a referendum in a first mandate. Are you favorable or unfavorable to this idea? The results, I have to say, surprised me. I kind of knew that a majority would say unfavorable because the no side is leading in the polls. But 49% of respondents said very unfavorable. Only 19% said very favorable. And so this is the dynamic. This is the line where you start. So basically the yes side, the pro-sovereignty sides, starts the game 3 goals behind, in my hockey analogy. And then you have to fight for the middle. And basically the no side has to only do okay in the middle. And this question is interesting because, again, it digs a little deeper that those who are against sovereignty, although they're not as loud or maybe as motivated, they are far more committed, or at least are far more committed than the yes side. And this is a major challenge for the Parti Québécois. Now, the Parti Québécois and the Sovereigntists could cry foul, say, oh, this is just a poll, it's Palace data, he's from Toronto. He just published your best poll in 12 years with 38% of voting intentions. So you can't cherry pick. It tells you that Parti Québécois is doing well. The leader is the most popular leader among all. But the idea of holding a referendum is really a problem. And so this will be the team. Well, one of the major teams in the Quebec election, year for the next 12 months. And again, I have to say, those numbers surprised me. I didn't think they would be so tilted towards where we don't want a referendum. So
it is the big wild card, I think, going into the campaign next year, because right now a lot of the energy, I think, that's going the PQ's way is an anti-CAQ energy.
Oh, yeah.
And if the next campaign is no longer, like, let's say we're entering the next campaign and the CQ is at 10% and everybody knows they're not going to win. They're not even going to be close to forming government, so they're irrelevant. It's not about the Legault record anymore because the public has already decided he's not going to be premier. Then it's going to be about, does Quebec want to have a referendum? And as your poll suggests, Quebecers don't really want to do that. And now maybe enough will want to do that to elect a government, but it is still a big risk, I think, for Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon. I think part of it is that, especially if people have the perception that a referendum is not going to be successful, then it is just going to be an exercise in disruption. And I think that is an easy door for the Liberals and some of the other parties to push at. That, is this really what the province needs right now? So I think that is going to be a big risk for the PQ. But they can't really abandon it either, right?
No, they can't. That's the thing. They can't. Well, not at this point. Or they would have to. They would have to do it like in a smoother way. We'll hold consultations or something, because Provincial Plamondon has been adamant. And he had many chances to walk it back, and he never did. So, yeah, to be continued. Very interesting stuff.
All right, let's close with the number of the week. How about, do you got a good one? Do you want me to go first?
Yes, I do. I do have. So, Léger poll. Perceived likelihood of Poilievre one day defeating Mark Carney. Well, one day, in the next general election. So, based on how you feel about things, do you feel that Pierre Poilievre has a good or poor chance of defeating Liberal Mark Carney in the next general election, whenever that might be? Overall, interesting numbers, but it's not the one we're looking at. Overall, 50% say a poor chance and 36% say a good chance. Okay, among conservatives, and now that's the good number, 72% of conservative voters say that Poilievre has a good chance to beat Carney. Is it me, or it's not that high? It's a majority. It's not that high, right? To give you an idea, 74% of Liberals think he has a poor chance of defeating Carney. Similar proportions in the reverse, of course. So again, when I'm looking at in these numbers on Pierre Poilievre, I mentioned earlier the Angus Street Institute and now Léger, I am looking to see whether conservative voters, how much they back this guy. Because we know most do, but Bonnie Crombie just had most of the votes in the convention, in the leadership convention. So I really wonder what we're going to see this fall through the convention in Calgary. That's my number.
All right, that was an interesting one. Mine is going to be a very simple one. Okay. It is 40. It's the number of districts that are up for grabs in Newfoundland and Labrador. It's always important when there's an election on the table, so I wanted to mark the fact that Newfoundland and Labradorians are Newfoundlanders and Labradorians are going to the polls and will be electing 40 MHAs, members of the House of Assembly. But one of the things that made me laugh about this is that they've had a couple elections now. Well, the one before, anyway. Why have an even number of seats?
Why not? You just have
causes
to elect
trouble.
No, it doesn't. Trouble. No, it doesn't.
You should have an odd number.
It takes 21 to have a majority. That's it.
Yeah, but you can have a tie. Anyway.
But you have a speaker.
So. Yeah, which even complicates it more. But anyway, this is my little comment. Editorial comment. Add one seat, Newfoundland and Labrador. Find one. Anyway, just voters will go in there on October 14th.
Here's a better take. If there's no polls whatsoever, just cancel the election. Do it later. Right? Of course not. All right.
The only poll that matters, Philippe, is the poll on election day.
I've heard this. Yeah. Absolutely.
Have you heard it? Okay. That'll be it for this week. You can join us at thenumberspod.ca. We're going to do another special episode on Friday. Not exactly sure what we'll do. We have some ideas, but we might just do a mailbag. Yeah. We might do a quiz. We'll see. But if you want to listen to that, go to thenumberspod.ca to support our project. You get ad-free and early access to all episodes. And you also get our eternal thanks. And if you're already a member, thanks very much for your support. So, Philippe, hope you have a good week, and we'll chat in a couple of days.
Merci beaucoup, Eric. Merci beaucoup, tout le monde. Have a great week. Take care.